Oh, but lose the bonny hills. Oh, but lose the shining rills. I for thee my bosom fills. Bonny Galloway, land o' darkly rolling deep, land o' silvery winding green, kissed by Solway's foaming sea. Bonny Galloway, oh, among Scotia's chiefs can shine, heroes of the Douglas line, Maxwell's, Gordon's, all are thine. Bonny Galloway, land of birk and rowan tree, land of pearl and forest free, land as I say dear to me. Bonny Galloway. Oh, it's true. Every word of that song is true, folks. This is the most beautiful place to be. And it's from Bonny Galloway. In fact, on the Machars Peninsula, a place called Whithorn. This is the headquarters of the Scottish Heritage Party. And this is where I'm speaking to you today and welcoming you to this week's Lindsay Tartan Politics Show. And I know I'm not the only one anymore who wears a tartan scarf, who is a female member of the Scottish political world, because I'm honoured that Kate Forbes has decided to copy me. But that's another story. So, welcoming you this week to an education special. And this is where, oh, I'm so excited about this. This is a subject very dear to my heart as a teacher myself of many years. And I can't begin to tell you how angry I am. And I hope you are too. As parents or fellow teachers or kids or young people going to school as pupils or students, you all ought to be angry. Well, let me begin with a few days ago, about a week ago. There was a video produced by Neil Oliver of Noble fame as historian, archaeologist and broadcaster. And okay, first of all, he started as you would do. Anyway, who's got any sense, he did have a bit of a pop at Hamza Yusuf, and he was explaining about this is a prodigy. This man appears to be an absolute Sturgeon lookalike, a prodigy of the Sturgeon establishment, if you like. He went on to talk about the power base being moved gradually from where it used to be in the Highlands and Islands, represented by Kate Forbes, who is MSP for Skye and Lochaber, And that used to be the power base, because the first ever SNP MP, I believe, was Donald Stewart. We talked about him last week. MP for the West, MSP, well, MP then, for the Western Isles, and how that used to be the power base, but now it's shifted a lot to Glasgow. And of course, we know who the Glasgow protege is. We've just mentioned him. Then he was talking about the apathy, the creeping kind of apathy and couldn't be bothered that's come in. Just so many people have become so discouraged after the lockdown, COVID, and everything that's gone on. And he's talking about the massive divide, really, between the political establishment in Scotland and indeed in the UK as a whole, between Scotland in particular and the people, the ordinary people. Massive divide, because all these politicians all the time come up with their buzzwords and their strap lines, you know, like equality, diversity, inclusiveness, gay, trans, how else is, sustainability, there's another one. Oh yes, all these things that are trotted, and really what people want is good, down-to-earth administration where people's views, including the views of parents and children and teachers, which I'll talk about in a minute, where the views are actually taken seriously, and where you've got good, practical politicians who actually care about people and improving people's lives. And he mentioned in particular about people are wanting desperately to see well-maintained infrastructure, including schools, hospitals, roads, ferries that actually work, that go to the islands, and so on and so forth. In particular, let's look today at what he says about well-maintained schools and motivated and dedicated teachers, and how education, how are the mighty fallen, to quote a biblical phrase. This was actually when King David was talking about the death of Saul and Jonathan in the Bible. But I tell you what, it applies equally well to the Scottish education system. How is the mighty fallen? That's my education special today. And I'll tell you a brief bit of history about myself. This is why I'm so interested in it. And in fact, I did actually write the Scottish Heritage, most of the Scottish Heritage Party education policy, bringing life to education, which you can see on our Scottish Heritage Party website, folks. I just don't know where to begin. But I'll tell you a wee bit about why I'm interested in education. Because I graduated in classics with ancient history, that's Latin, Greek, and ancient history, some time ago from St Andrews University. And after a little while, I decided I wanted to teach. So I've seen a lot of the education world in Scotland and indeed in England over a number of years. And I've always had a passion for excellence. I've always loved teaching. I've always loved the kids, to be honest, and just loved the whole scenario of teaching. So I started off in East Kilbride, a great big huge secondary school called Duncanrig. Some of you will be familiar with it. 2,100 pupils in those days. That's in the mid-70s. So you never knew which Egypt had set off the fire alarm at lunchtime. This is true. And then I went to Jedburgh Grammar School, which is very like the local secondary school here in Newton Stewart. Very similar, 500 kids or thereabouts still to this day. A mixture of mostly rural children. Farmers' kids, shepherds' kids, also people from the town. Very similar to here. These were both obviously state schools. And then I went into the private sector to Dundee High School and also Gordonston School. That was a real privilege, which I see, by the way, still teaches Latin and Greek, much to my joy. And so because of my subjects, classics, right? Latin, Greek, ancient history, classical civilization, classics. They were being squeezed out of the state sector even in the 70s and early 80s. So I did end up teaching a lot in the private sector, not only Gordonston, but also the Queen's School, Chester, and so on. So I've seen a lot. And I retired actually 11, 12 years ago, but I've seen a lot. I'm still teaching now, but it's more online teaching, like different classical things, subjects, classical backgrounds still. And I'm just shocked to read and see what is going on in Scottish schools. For example, this headline in the Daily Mail, Scottish Daily Mail, about a couple of weeks ago, said this: SNP education reforms destroy pupils' futures. Now you might say, oh, well, that's just from like a Tory, like they call idiots, don't they, here? Or, like the famous phrase in the recent trans demonstration, I think it was in Glasgow, God hates Tories. I don't think so. I just think he hates anybody who lets down and betrays his children, actually. Okay, so this starts with this. This is not a political statement, actually. This is from a study, researchers from Stirling University. And it was paid, but I think it was financed by the Nuffield Foundation. So it's not necessary, it's not just a Tory thing or a Labour thing. It's a general thing. And it's saying here there is something introduced by the SNP in 2010 called the Curriculum for Excellence. Well, that's a joke for a start, because they made a very, very tight curriculum for excellence, which has reduced subject choice. And I think last year, I'm right in saying only 43% of Scottish pupils managed to achieve 3 or more hires, which is like the Scottish equivalent of A-levels, really, for those who don't know. And this is about the lowest figure ever. In Scotland, the education system has gone down and down and down the international tables as well of achievement. It used to be that Scotland's education was hugely respected, was the best apart from Northern Ireland. I'm talking 20, 30, 40 years ago, which was also regarded as excellent. So having a look at this, these are the people from Stirling University who researched this. The findings paint a stark picture of curriculum reform that's diverged considerably from its original aims, with significant unintended consequences. I'd be sure they're unintended, I wonder sometimes. From its original aims, for young people, teachers and schools, and with serious equity concerns, because actually it's a much narrower education with fewer choice of subjects, and particularly optional subjects like modern languages. Okay, this is all from the report, remember? Funded by the Nuffield Foundation, analysed existing and new data from the Scottish Government, finds, of course, this is no surprise, that it's even worse in areas of high economic deprivation. Whatever happened to this sort of levelling up of education, this great vision of Miss Sturgeon? Whatever happened to it? It's a source of shame. It's found that the system is far too system-oriented, and teachers spend a lot of their time educating to the tight demands of the system. Now, this, of course, is before you had COVID. Well, not before, but including the time of COVID, made much worse by COVID, by lockdown, and by teachers' strikes. So let's have a look at the present situation, apart from the high criticism by these expert researchers, professors, and high academics from Scottish universities. So we're having a look at Scottish teachers now. Now, the average salary, just to let you know, of a Scottish teacher, average salary, this is, there's some lower, some higher, of course, It's at present £35,154 a year, which is actually 6% higher than the average salary in Scotland. So maybe not that bad. No, I'm coming to that. It's the average salary across Scotland. The teachers in Scotland are paid 6% higher than the average Scottish person's salary across Scotland only. Right? Now, there's a new pay offer come from Scottish Government. And under the new pay offer, a fully qualified Scottish teacher will get £35,650 a year. Now wait till you hear this. And this was the same when I was teaching down south in England. The Scottish teacher on that salary is paid over £7,500 a year more than those in England. Or I should say England and Wales. Now, one of the reasons for that, so Scottish teachers have always had a somewhat higher status and somewhat higher salaries, certainly when I was teaching too, than their counterparts in England. Why do you think this is? Well, I'll tell you a big reason for it. They have a very militant union called, it's not the only union, but it's the biggest one in Scotland. It's called EIS, which is the Educational Institute of Scotland. And boy, are they militant. Fascinating, isn't it? And so there are other unions in Scotland. I'll tell you the four of them. The Educational Institute of Scotland, the Scottish Secondary Teachers Association. That's obviously for secondary teachers. Teachers of the big kids, you know. That's who I was. And I was always a member of that union because I was a secondary teacher. Okay, the only nationwide, Great Britain, Scotland, England, Ireland, Wales union is the NASUWT, which is the National Association of Schoolmasters and Union of Women Teachers. Yes, 300,000 members across the UK. Now, they are not nearly so militant as the EIS. I have heard it said, because Dumfries and Galloway is not noted for its ultra-lefty, it's mainly the majority of regional councillors here are conservative. That's the majority. And the MP here is conservative. And, you know, some of the MSPs, at least I think it's two of them are conservative as well for the region. So, you know, it's not exactly lefty. But I know that their teachers have gone on strike, same as all the others. Not the dear underpaid nursery nurses, of course, but just the teachers in general. And some of them actually are not too keen to be on strike, but the union, you know, doesn't want them to go back yet to the squeeze. And you see, the thing is about this is what teachers are complaining about. And, you know, I understand their position because I was one for many years, about 40 years, something like that. And their main complaints are increased workload, I think especially administration, and indiscipline. Some of them are, you know, in Glasgow, I know for a start, not just Glasgow, but in parts of Glasgow, some of the schools have practically been a no-go area because some pupils are pretty much out of control. Well, that's of course because there are very few sanctions. When I started first, for quite a few years actually after I started, there was the belt, also known as the TAWS. I'm almost frightened to mention this now because people looked at me in England in absolute horror when I told them about how I started. When I started, you could use the belt. Oh, you didn't! Yes, I did. Not very much, just sparingly, you understand. And you weren't allowed to do more than 6 in one hand anyway. You know, but I just like to mention that there was once something called a Lochgelly extra heavy. Because you see, these belts were all made in Lochgelly. I'm not advocating we should go flogging kids all over the place, but I'm just telling you that was a pretty good deterrent for some people. Trouble was, this TAWS or belt on the hand was abused and misused by quite a large number of teachers who also used things like rulers and throwing blackboard rubbers at people. So, you know, I can understand the argument for maybe not having it or not having it except under very restricted conditions. Of course I can. But the thing is that you're also highly discouraged from, I think, expulsion and even suspension from school, certainly in state schools, is very much frowned upon and very, very limited. So I don't know what you do now about discipline. There's a new generation of head teachers who seem to be complained about a lot as being weak and not backing up their staff when their staff have discipline issues in the classroom. And of course, you've got to remember there's a tiny little problem with drugs in some areas as well, and drink and stuff like that can slightly affect pupils' behavior. It can, let's be real. So one of these two issues are heavy workload they're complaining about and indiscipline. Well, why go on strike? Because what you're doing then, I mean, it's a sign of general discontent anyway, I think, among teachers, but what you're actually doing is harming the children and also the parents, especially working parents who've, it's very difficult for them. Why don't the teachers, just a suggestion, why don't you work to rule and just refuse to fill in your paperwork? That would directly hit the government and the local councils. Instead of, that would be much, in my view, much more effective. It's just a suggestion, rather walking out and letting these poor kids go further behind. Because you see, there is another issue here. They've already had massive gaps in their education because of lockdown. This is another issue. And lockdown caused all sorts of physical and mental issues. And indeed, a great increase of child abuse in the home as well, unfortunately, and things like that. A great increase in truancy. Kids never wanting to go back to school again. This has all come out of the policies then. So how is it going to help them to lose more time at school, have more disruption, which also, by the way, will affect their behavior in the classroom? The more disruption they have to their education, the more they'll play up. Obviously, human nature. It's also mad. Now, the kids need continuity and stability, both at home and in school. That's what children need. And they need boundaries about what's acceptable, what's not acceptable in their behavior in the classroom. Of course they do. It's all mad stuff. And I'm telling you now, I have taught for many years in independent schools. I never remember any teachers in an independent school going on strike. It's very rare because it's run, although many of them are charities, registered charities, they're run as a business. Because the parents are paying a lot of money, they've got to see value for money in their school. Otherwise, they won't send the children there, even if they can afford to, which is increasingly rare, unfortunately. So the gap, what I'm trying to say, folks, is the gap between state schools and independent schools and the performance in exams, etc., is getting wider and wider. It's a tragedy. Then there's the question of what they're being taught. I always thought that, and the Scottish Heritage Party, we have got real clear policies in bringing life back to education and involving the parents more, because parents have a right to know what is being taught to their children in school. They have a right to know. And the teachers have a duty. The schools have a duty to tell them. But this is such a huge problem that now, all over the place, you've got questions being asked of schools and widespread criticism of education. For those of you who don't know him, there's somebody called the Bald Explorer, also known as Richard Robes, who frequently puts programs on YouTube, gets 6-figure viewings. And one of the most recent ones he's done is, Are Schools Fit for Purpose? You see, the teachers are supposed to be in loco parentis, which means in the place of the parents. They're not supposed to just do their own thing at the behest of the Scottish government. They are there in place of the parents, representing the parents, if you like. So why is it that so few parents are told what exactly is going on in school? Why is it that Scottish government education advice is to basically to tell the parents as little as possible, which it is honestly true. It's absolutely appalling. So how many parents know that their children are being, I wouldn't say perhaps groomed is too strong a word, into transgender procedures from an early age, and the parents are advised not to be told? That is absolutely true. It is just so. Finally, what's happened is that at long last, thank God, apart from the fact that there is now a big Scottish branch of the Free Speech Union, there also is a new union that's been formed to battle the SNP's indoctrination of school children. And that union is known as SUE. Yes, it is a girl's name, but it also stands for the Scottish Union for Education, SUE for short. Thank God, parents, teachers and lecturers have started this union in a bid to fight back against some of the teaching in schools. I see, in the recent newsletter, this is newsletter number 4 in February, it's explaining how SUE are explaining how the Nicola Sturgeon legacy has continued to undermine the role of parents and does not serve the children well. The same battle in an even bigger scale, by the way, is going on in the USA, which your parents are fighting back. The numbers homeschooling their children, parents, because not everybody can afford private education. Not everybody maybe even wants to, because a lot of private independent schools, unfortunately, in this country are being bought up by Chinese consortiums. This is very interesting, but a bit disturbing. I can tell you of a few that have. And there's a massive increase, of course, in overseas students coming from China. This is not racism. I love the Chinese people. It's to do with the fact of Chinese government surveillance that comes along with these people, and it does. But anyway, that is true. So, as I say, there is a great increase in parents homeschooling their children, which is something that at one point in our children's lives, for a fairly short period of their lives, we did ourselves, and very successfully. So, one of the key aims of SUE, the Scottish Union for Education, this new body, I quote, is we want to seize this opportunity to push for more public discussion on education policy, because it was a very sinister policy or bill that very nearly passed through the Scottish government. It was only stopped because it was regarded as an infringement of human rights, the right to privacy and the right to family privacy. This was called, if you remember, the Named Persons Scheme. And as SUE quite rightly point out, this very sinister policy by which every child would have a named guardian, as well as their parents, to be a named guardian, it was stopped. But the philosophy and thinking behind it is still very much alive in the Scottish government. And in fact, they say in the SUE newsletter that Nicola Sturgeon was a pioneer in the criminalisation and monitoring of parents under the Named Persons Scheme. Absolutely. And then, this was anyway thwarted in 2016. So they didn't actually do that. The named person was going to be a key professional who dealt with children. Initially, this would be a health visitor, then a nursery leader, then the head teacher of a school, and so on until adulthood. This was the plan. Now, the trouble is that originally such people would be on the watch for child abuse. But now it was almost as if every parent had to be watched, every household had to be watched, which is absolutely horrendous. State surveillance of households. Really, as I've said, almost a Chinese government type legislation. Absolutely horrendous. And the whole idea was to gather data on children and make sure the parents were fulfilling the government objectives for children. So although this failed, as this newsletter quite rightly says, the motivation behind the act, the Named Persons Act, and the spirit in which it was introduced remains to this day. Because after that, of course, came criminalization of parents who struck their children. Already it was illegal to do heavy smacking, but then, parents weren't allowed anymore, and this is similar in Wales, weren't allowed anymore to even tap their children on the back of the hand or so on. Now, Miss Sturgeon always presented herself as progressive and a friend of children in Scotland, very caring and progressive, but that disguises an iron fist. Under the soft glove, there's an iron fist. And who knows whether that will change. It very much depends on what happens with the fight, the election for leadership. Well, folks, maybe that's enough to be going on with at the moment. But remember that the Scottish Heritage Party is here for you to make a difference in education, to rescue the perishing in education. It's absolutely, never forget that Scotland has got a great history of excellence in every field. Never forget originally that the church was behind the development of education for all in Scotland, and that parents were respected. But now the foundations of this education have been removed. It's rapidly declining, and this has to be acknowledged. Even the SNP have admitted that their targets have not all been met. Their targets including equal achievement, no matter how deprived the area in which, or the households in which are in that area. This has not worked. So we need to bring back motivation, dedicated teachers, well-maintained schools, involved parents, not just for fundraising, but involved in education policy, informed about education policy. And we need a much wider and more demanding range of school subjects, particularly from 12 to 18, as an age-appropriate education, personal and social education, age-appropriate. It's shocking what's been going on. And it's only the tip of the iceberg. We're not told all of that. Children must be allowed to be children, and parents must be allowed to be parents, and teachers must be allowed to teach without themselves being brainwashed, full of buzzwords, absolutely ridiculous. What we need is education, and we need including in that such things as, and I've got them here, and there needs to be love and acceptance, genuine love and acceptance of all children. Yes, of all races, all colors, all faiths, or none. I mean, that is all true. But no more woke. So I've had my rant this week on Education Special. I'd love to hear from you about all this. I'd love to hear back from parents, teachers, and young people, please, about what you think, about any suggestions that you have about the way forward to get back to the great achievements when there used to be where we're all Jock Thompson's bairns, and there used to be a lado parents in every school, or a lasso parents, meaning ordinary people from poor backgrounds who achieved great things and went on to great success all over the world. That's all for now. Please don't forget to look at the Scottish Heritage Party website and the other programs in there, like our precious Constitution, which is increasingly important as we lead up to this apparent coronation in May. Don't forget to watch that program that comes on a Monday with David Griffiths, who's the Scottish Co-Ordinator of the Scottish Heritage Party, our precious Constitution, and also This Week in Scotland on a Friday by the self-same David Griffiths. And I'm going to say bye to you right now from the Lindsay TARTAN Politics Show, from Lindsay here, having had my rant about education. And we're going to finish with a beautiful song which talks about the old Scotland, the real Scotland, which you want to see back again. It's the Rowan Tree. Oh, rowan tree, oh, rowan tree, thou tie be dear to me, and twine thou art with many ties, O hame and infancy. Thy leaves were I the first of spring, thy flowers a summer's pride. There was no sick a bonny tree in all the countryside. Oh, rowan tree. How fair art thou in summer time, we all thy clusters white. How rich and gay in autumn dress, we berries red and bright. On thy fair stem were many names, which now nae more I see, but there engraven on my head, forgot they ne'er can be. O rowan tree, oh, there arose my father's prayer in holy evening's calm. How sweet was then my mother's voice in the martyr's song. Now again we meet and neath the rowan tree, but hallowed thoughts around thee turn, O hame and infancy. Oh, yes, rowan tree. What a great song. It's what we want back. The old paths in a new Scotland, but a real Scotland. And part of the Union. because we're called to be real leaders in every way, spiritually and academic, every way of the union. Thank you so much for being with me for this week's Lindsay Tartan Politics Show. From here at Whithorn, headquarters of the Scottish Heritage Party. Bye for now.